I never thought closing off my own driveway would cause such an uproar. But then again, I should have known better. Living next to Karen meant that every decision I made on my own property was somehow her business. She had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in, a self-appointed queen of a neighborhood, always watching, always judging. It all started when I decided to do some much-needed renovations. My driveway had a few cracks, and the drainage was terrible every time it rained. I figured it was time to fix it, maybe even expand it a little. So, I put up some temporary barriers and got to work. Simple, right? Not with Karen around. The moment she saw the orange cones blocking my driveway, she was at my door. "You can't do that," she said, crossing her arms. Her short blonde bob was stiff with hairspray, and her mouth was curled in that ever-present frown. "People need to turn around here. You're blocking access." "Karen, it's my driveway." I tried to be polite, but I already knew where this was going. She scoffed. "You don't own the whole street. What if I need to use it?" "You have your own driveway," I pointed out. She huffed. "That's not the point. This affects the whole neighborhood. You should have gotten approval first." That's when I knew she wasn't going to let it go. Sure enough, an hour later, I saw her standing on her porch, phone in hand, staring directly at me. Moments later, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, looking more confused than anything. I stopped digging and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Can I help you, officers?" One of them, a tall guy with a tired expression, cleared his throat. "We got a complaint about a blocked driveway." I sighed, glancing at Karen, who stood with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "It's my driveway." The officer turned to look at it. "Yeah, that's what it looks like." He frowned, as if he too was trying to figure out why he was even here. "You doing some repairs?" "Yep," I said. "Cracks, drainage issues. Just fixing it up." The officer nodded, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this is private property. He has the right to do maintenance on his driveway." Karen's face turned red. "But it's inconvenient. He's disrupting the neighborhood." The officer gave her a look that said he was done with this conversation. "Unless he's violating a code or blocking public access, there's no issue here." Karen muttered something under her breath and stormed back inside. The cops left soon after, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong, because while I was digging, my shovel hit something. Something hard. Something metal. And that's when everything changed. At first, I thought I had just hit a rock. That's common enough when digging, and I didn't think much of it. But when I tried to move my shovel again, there was that clunk, a deep, hollow sound, not the dull thud of stone. I knelt down and brushed away the dirt with my hands. Beneath the loose soil, something smooth and metallic reflected the sunlight. A buried pipe? An old water main? No, this was different. The metal was flat, wide, and completely out of place. I grabbed a small hand shovel and started scraping away more dirt. Inch by inch, the surface revealed itself, rusted in some spots, but still solid, with strange ridges along the edges. It was a panel of some kind. The more I uncovered, the stranger it became. This wasn't just a random piece of junk buried underground. The metal extended in every direction, as if part of something much larger. And then I found the real kicker: bolts. Not just any bolts, but large industrial ones, driven deep into the structure, as if sealing something shut. A hatch. A chill ran down my spine. What the hell was a hatch doing under my driveway? I sat back on my heels, wiping sweat from my forehead. My house wasn't particularly old, built in the 70s, just like the rest of the neighborhood. There had never been any record of underground shelters or tunnels here, at least none that I knew of. And yet here it was. My curiosity burned hotter than the midday sun. I needed to know what was down there. I ran to my garage and grabbed a crowbar. Wedging it under the edge of one of the bolts, I pushed down with all my strength. It barely budged. Whatever this thing was, it had been sealed tight for a long time. I needed tools, real tools. Maybe even a power drill. But just as I was about to head inside to grab what I needed, I felt something. A presence. I turned my head slowly. Across the street, a black SUV sat idling near the curb. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside. My heartbeat picked up. That car hadn't been there earlier. And it wasn't just passing through, it was watching. I swallowed hard. Was I being paranoid? Or had I just uncovered something I wasn't supposed to find? I took a step closer to my house, trying to act casual. The SUV didn't move. Then, as if on cue, it slowly rolled forward, turned the corner, and disappeared. Something told me this was only the beginning. I stood frozen in my driveway, gripping the crowbar so tightly my knuckles turned white. The black SUV had vanished around the corner, but the uneasy feeling it left behind lingered like a shadow. My quiet little renovation project had just taken a turn into something far stranger than I ever anticipated. I glanced back at the partially uncovered hatch. My driveway had been here for decades. Whatever this thing was, it had been buried long before I moved in. But the real question was, why was someone watching me the moment I found it? Before I could dwell on it further, a familiar screech cut through the air. "Now what are you up to?" I turned to see Karen standing at the edge of her porch, arms crossed tightly, eyes narrowed in suspicion. She had the uncanny ability to appear exactly when I didn't want her to, like a neighborhood alarm system I never signed up for. "I'm digging," I said flatly, hoping she'd lose interest. "Oh, I can see that," she snapped. "And I saw that black car sitting here too. You expecting company?" "No," I muttered, suddenly regretting that she had noticed it. If Karen had seen it, that meant she would gossip about it. And if she gossiped, word would spread fast. She stepped off her porch, marching toward me with the same self-importance she always carried. "You know, I was this close to calling the police again. First, you blocked the driveway. Now you're digging up God knows what." I exhaled sharply. "Karen, it's my property. I can dig a hole if I want to." She sniffed, clearly unimpressed. "Well, you're not the only one who lives here. If you start messing with city lines or underground gas pipes, don't come crying to me when the whole block blows up." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't right either. "It's not a gas pipe," I said. Her eyes darted to the hatch. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Curiosity, maybe even concern. "What is that?" I hesitated. The last thing I needed was Karen poking her nose even deeper into this. "Not sure yet." She squinted at me, then at the hatch. "You'd better not be into anything illegal," she said, wagging a finger. "If I see strangers coming and going at all hours, I will call the police again." And with that, she turned on her heel and stomped back to her house. I let out a slow breath. Karen was annoying, but she wasn't the real problem. That SUV had been watching me, not her. I looked at the hatch one more time, then at the corner where the car had disappeared. Something told me that by the time night fell, I wouldn't just be dealing with nosy neighbors. I was being watched. And whoever they were, they didn't want me to keep digging. The sun had started to dip below the rooftops, casting long shadows across my yard. Karen had finally retreated into her house, though I knew she'd be peeking through her curtains all night. That was the least of my concerns now. The SUV, the strange metal hatch, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to find. I grabbed my flashlight and knelt beside the partially uncovered structure. My fingers traced the rusted bolts, thick and industrial, driven deep into the metal. This thing had been sealed shut for a reason. The question was it to keep people out or to keep something in? A shiver crawled up my spine, but I pushed the thought away. I needed answers. I retrieved my toolbox from the garage and set to work, starting with a wrench to loosen the bolts. They were old, caked with dirt and corrosion, but after some effort, the first one creaked loose. Encouraged, I moved to the next, sweat forming on my brow despite the cool evening air. With each bolt I removed, an eerie sense of anticipation built inside me. By the time I reached the last one, my hands were trembling. I wasn't sure if it was from exertion or something else. I wedged my crowbar under the edge of the hatch and pried. At first, it resisted, as if the earth itself was trying to hold it shut. Then, with a deep groan, the metal gave way. A rush of stale air escaped, carrying with it the scent of dust, rust, and something faintly chemical. I aimed my flashlight into the darkness below. A ladder extended down into a space I couldn't yet see the bottom of. The walls, at least from what I could make out, weren't dirt or rock, they were metal. A bunker? An old storage facility? I took a deep breath and tested the ladder with my foot. It held. Slowly, carefully, I climbed down, my flashlight beam cutting through the thick darkness. The temperature dropped with each step. When my feet finally touched the ground, I turned in a slow circle, trying to take in my surroundings. It was a room. A hidden room. Dust-covered shelves lined the walls, filled with old equipment. Outdated monitors, thick stacks of yellowed documents, strange metallic boxes with faded government markings. Everything about this place screamed classified. I stepped forward and picked up a file from one of the shelves. The cover was stamped with a single word in bold, red ink. Project Revenant. My pulse thundered in my ears. What the hell had I just uncovered? Then a noise. A creak from above. I turned off my flashlight and held my breath. Someone was up there. I wasn't alone. I froze, gripping a file marked Project Revenant in one hand and my flashlight in the other. Above me, footsteps creaked against the ground. Slow, cautious. Someone was standing at the edge of the hatch. Karen? No. She wouldn't sneak around. She'd barge in, demanding answers. This was someone else. Someone who didn't want to be seen. I pressed my back against the cold metal wall, heart pounding. I needed to stay quiet, to listen. But then, clang. The hatch slammed shut. I jolted forward, sprinting to the ladder. But by the time I reached it, I heard the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal. Whoever was up there was sealing it, locking me in. I banged against the underside of the hatch. Hey, who's up there? No response. Only silence. Then, after a few agonizing seconds, the distant sound of retreating footsteps. Panic clawed at my throat. I was trapped underground in a hidden bunker, alone, with no idea what I had just uncovered. I sucked in a breath and forced myself to think logically. First, I needed to check if there was another way out. Sweeping my flashlight across the room, I scanned the shelves, the old monitors, the rusted filing cabinets. My eyes landed on a heavy metal door at the far end of the bunker. I hurried over and tried the handle. It didn't budge. Locked. I cursed under my breath. I needed to focus. This place was old. There had to be a ventilation shaft or maintenance hatch somewhere. But before I could search, something else caught my attention. A folder lay open on a nearby desk, as if someone had left in a hurry. Inside, there were faded photographs, clipped to pages of classified reports. Some of the pictures were of people, men in military uniforms, scientists in lab coats. Others were more disturbing. Aerial shots of strange, circular structures in the desert. Some kind of wreckage. And then a name that made my blood run cold. My town. My street. My exact address. What the hell was this? A noise from above made me jump. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was a voice. Police. Open up. Karen. Of course. Even with the bunker sealed. She must have seen something and called the cops, again. But in this case, she might have just saved my life. I scrambled back to the ladder and pounded against the hatch. Hey, I'm down here. More voices. The sound of footsteps. A radio crackling. Then, the metallic screech of the hatch being pried open. Light poured in, momentarily blinding me. A uniformed officer peered down. What the hell are you doing down there? I looked up at him, breathless. I think I just found something I wasn't supposed to. And for the first time in my life, I was actually glad Karen had called the cops. The officer helped me climb out of the bunker, his grip firm as he pulled me up. My legs were shaky, both from exhaustion and the sheer weight of what I had just discovered. As I stepped onto solid ground again, I found myself staring at not just one, but 3 police officers standing in my driveway, their expressions a mix of confusion and suspicion. And then there was Karen. She stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes flashing with self-righteous satisfaction. I told you he was up to something shady, she declared. First, he blocks his driveway. Then he starts digging up the ground like some kind of criminal. I shot her an irritated look, but before I could say anything, the first officer, the one who had helped me out, stepped forward. "Sir, what exactly is this?" He gestured toward the open hatch. I took a breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I was working on my driveway when I hit something metal. I started digging and found this hatch. It leads to an underground room filled with old equipment and files. Some of the documents mention classified projects. One of the other officers frowned. "Classified? As in government documents?" I nodded. It looked like it. The three of them exchanged glances, and I could tell this had just escalated beyond their pay grade. The first officer sighed and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we might need someone from Federal on this." Karen's eyes widened. "Federal? Like the FBI? See? I knew something was weird about this." I rubbed my temples. "Karen, for once, can you not make this about you?" She huffed, but didn't say anything else. The officer turned back to me. "Until we figure out what this is, I need you to stay away from it. We don't know if it's dangerous." I almost laughed. Dangerous? Whoever had closed that hatch on me earlier had already made that pretty clear. But I just nodded. Understood. One of the officers crouched by the opening, shining his flashlight down. "This looks old, but why would something like this be buried under a residential property?" I had no idea, but I intended to find out. As the officers continued inspecting the site, my gaze drifted to the street. A chill ran down my spine. The black SUV was back, parked at a distance, engine running, watching. Whoever they were, they weren't done with me yet. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I locked eyes with the black SUV. It wasn't just watching anymore, it was making a statement. A warning. I turned to the officers, who were still inspecting the hatch and murmuring among themselves. If they had noticed the SUV, they didn't seem concerned. Either they were too preoccupied, or they had no idea what was happening. I had a sinking feeling it was the latter. Before I could decide what to do, the SUV suddenly pulled away, its tires rolling smoothly against the pavement. No rush, no panic. Whoever was inside wanted me to know they could come and go as they pleased. And that terrified me more than if they had sped off in a hurry. Karen must have noticed my expression because she scoffed. "Oh, please. That car has been circling all day. You act like you've never seen a government vehicle before." I whipped my head toward her. "What?" She shrugged, as if it were obvious. "You think I don't notice things? Men in suits, dark cars. This isn't my first time seeing feds lurking around. You dig up some secret bunker, and now they're watching? Not exactly a shocker." I stared at her. "And you didn't think to mention this sooner?" She smirked. "I was waiting to see if you'd get arrested first." I wanted to scream. Karen's nosiness had gotten me into trouble plenty of times. But this? She had been sitting on actual information that might have helped me. One of the officers finally turned back to me. "Listen, we're going to need to rope this area off until we get a team down here. You said you found documents. Do you still have them?" I hesitated. The Project Revenant file was still in my pocket, folded and hidden. I wasn't sure if I trusted these guys. After all, if this really was a government secret, who was to say they weren't involved in keeping it buried? But lying to the cops wasn't exactly a great option either. Before I could answer, a sharp buzzing sound filled the air. One of the officers pulled out his radio, listening for a second before stiffening. "Copy that," he said, his voice suddenly tense. He turned to the others. "We need to clear out. Now." The other officers looked confused, but they didn't argue. One of them grabbed some yellow tape, but the first officer waved him off. No. Now, something was wrong. Karen, for once, actually looked uneasy. "Wait, what's happening?" The officer didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Pity? Regret? "Listen to me," he said quietly. "Leave this alone. If you keep digging, you won't like what you find." And just like that, they got in their squad cars and drove off, leaving me alone, with the hatch, with Project Revenant. The police left so fast it was like they couldn't get away quickly enough. No roping off the area, no follow-up questions, just a vague warning and tires screeching down the street. Karen stood next to me, for once at a loss for words. She hugged herself, her usual smugness replaced by something that almost looked like concern. "I don't like this," she muttered. "Even the cops don't want to touch it." For once, I agreed with her. I looked down at the hatch, still open, revealing the rusted metal ladder leading into darkness. My flashlight was still down there, its beam casting eerie shadows across the bunker's walls. The file marked Project Revenant was burning a hole in my pocket. I needed answers. But first, I needed to be sure I wasn't about to be silenced before I could get them. I turned to Karen. "Do you have cameras?" She blinked. "What?" "Security cameras. Anything facing my house." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I have one that points toward your driveway." "Why?" "If anything happens to me tonight, check them." I met her gaze. "And if that black SUV comes back, don't call the cops. Call someone who will actually do something." For the first time in our history of bickering, Karen looked genuinely rattled. "What the hell have you gotten yourself into?" I had no answer. As night fell, I locked every door and double-checked the windows. My mind was racing. Someone, some group, had buried that bunker for a reason. And now, the moment I uncovered it, I was being watched, followed, warned. I sat at my kitchen table and unfolded the Project Revenant file. Pages of technical jargon, maps, and old photographs stared back at me. But one section stood out, a list of names. Some were crossed out. At the bottom, my breath caught in my throat. My address. My name. A chill ran through me. My fingers trembled as I traced the ink. This wasn't just about some forgotten government project. This was about me. A noise outside made me flinch. A car door. I killed the lights and peeked through the blinds. The black SUV was parked across the street. Engine off. Headlights dark. Someone was inside. Watching. Waiting. This story serves as a warning. Curiosity can be dangerous. Sometimes, when you uncover something suspicious, the best thing you can do is leave it alone. Not every mystery needs solving, especially when powerful people don't want it solved. If you ever feel like you're being watched, followed, or pressured to stop asking questions, trust your instincts. Stay safe, be aware of your surroundings, and know when to step back before it's too late. Thank you for listening to this story. I appreciate your time, and I hope you've learned something valuable. Stay safe, trust your gut, and most importantly, take care of yourselves. Wishing you all good health and peace.